Welcome to the Backdoor Fantasy Sports Podcast with Russo and Jordy.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Russo and Jordy. We got another fantasy football show for you. Today, we're going to be talking about 6 veterans in Dynasty fantasy football that we would rather keep on our rosters than trade for what the current trade value is. These are guys that we think are just better off helping us contend, or even guys that we might want to just wait and let them produce a little bit before we trade, because the current market is just not giving us what we think these guys are worth. So before we get started, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you guys don't mind, give us a like. It just helps us get in front of a larger audience. We really appreciate the support. And let's start talking about these players. So my first player, I'm going to be going with Keenan Allen. So, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. Obviously, he's got some competition on his new team. We got DJ Moore out there. We got Rome Odunze. We also have some question marks. Chicago just brought in Shane Waldron, which I'm actually excited about. But you do have Caleb Williams. So how is he going to adjust from college to the NFL? I still think all of those question marks, I would rather keep Keenan Allen than trade him for what we're currently getting for him. Keep trade cut is giving us an average of a late second rounder for Keenan. And my experience, even trying to move Keenan, I'm not even getting that for him, which a late second rounder still isn't enough, in my opinion. We're talking about a player coming off of 150 targets with a 32% target share. I know he's not going to do that again. There was injuries in LA last year. We also had Quentin Johnston, Mr. Butterfingers, being really his only competition for targets, and wasn't doing much with his opportunities. So that's played a huge role in Keenan's huge year last year. But that 32% target share was third in the league. I don't expect him to do that again, playing 90% of snaps. But Shane Waldron, he does like to run a lot of 11 and 12 personnel, and he has over a 50% pass rate when he's running those schemes as well. So I think that there's going to be plenty of targets to be had for Keenan in Chicago. And also on top of that, Shane runs a lot of 2 wide receiver sets. And in my opinion, the Bears are hyped on Keenan. They said they want to keep him long term. We'll see if this is just, hyping up their new guy that they brought in, their veteran they brought in. But I think that DJ Moore will probably be the best player for fantasy. But where you're drafting DJ Moore and what you're getting for DJ Moore is a lot more than Keenan, when I think they could be pretty close in value, at least for this year. So I'd rather keep him on my roster. But anyways, in those 2 wide receiver sets, I just don't think it's going to be Rome Odunze just yet. Maybe I'm wrong. You can let me know in the comments if you think that Keenan will be on the sidelines and Rome will be out there in 2 wide receiver sets, at least not for the first half of the year. Last year, when Keenan had those 150 targets, he went for 108 receptions for 1,243 yards and 7 touchdowns. I think the touchdowns, maybe we could see 5 to 7 touchdowns again. I don't really expect him to get 150 targets, but I still don't think it's going to be that much of a regression there. He only had 5 drops on the year, which was 12th in the league. So we know what Keenan's capable of. I do think he's going to be playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and I'm not talking about the little hunch that he's got there. I like Keenan. I'm just saying he's going to be playing on his new team. He's going to be frustrated that the Chargers were trying to get him to take a pay cut, and we just saw how quickly that changed. He's in a contract year, and I think he's going to be just out there to ball out. He's probably going to love his new environment out in Chicago, and he's going to want to ball out and secure one more fat contract as he is working on the back 9 of his career. Chicago is 8th in strength of schedule, so pretty they should have a pretty easy road to success on the year. If we talk about Mike Clay's projections, his certified ESPN projections, which we love to reference on the show, he's got Keenan going for 14 games, 123 targets, 84 receptions, 882 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So I would much rather just play that this year and maybe move that mid-season if I can get more than a late second. But right now that just doesn't help my current situation. If you're a contender and you probably want to keep Keenan. If you're in total rebuild, I still don't know what a late second is going to do. I still think your best option is to just hang on to him and try to move him on a nice run of good games, or maybe a spike week where someone, maybe a contender in your league is like, hey, I'll give you X for Keenan, and I think you'll get more than a late second. So I just think people are sleeping on him a little too much. Let's see, what is he like? Okay, so yeah, he is 32 years old. I get that. But I still think, I was going to say for some reason, yeah,
dude, still
so
running a 4.3.
Yeah, exactly. Keenan's not running a 4.3, but I like his landing spot if he's going to be traded. And again, question marks with Caleb, but in my situation, my dynasty team is kind of, I would say, I'm playoff bound, hopefully. I made it to the championship last year. Jordy knocked me out. Jordy's got like a legit contender. He built just a monster team. And so he's in a different position than I'm in. But in my situation, I'm actually pretty running back heavy. We play single quarterback, full PPR, just so you guys know. But I've got like plenty of strength at running back, and I'm in a position where I don't really have any solid wide receivers. So I need guys like Keenan to actually show out for me. So I've tried packaging him in some trades for a legit wide receiver one, and just no one's biting. So, and it's probably because everyone thinks he's worth a late second rounder. So that's going to be my first play. I'd rather just hang on to Keenan and try to turn him, flip him for more later in the year, once we're like maybe mid-season, or maybe the first couple of games he pops off. But if I'm not getting more than a late second, I'm just going to hang on to him and ride him out until the wheels fall off. So, all right, bro, who do you got for us?
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. Use code BACKDOOR to receive a deposit match up to $250, plus an instant pick'em special just for you.
Yeah, so my first player here should not be a surprise. It's Ezekiel Elliott. I'm obviously a big Zeke fan. I've got Cowboys all over my room here, but I've been a huge fan of this guy ever since he was in Ohio State. I'm a big Ohio State fan, so I was a big fan of him coming out of there, and he ended up on my favorite team, so that worked out for me. But last year, he was not on my favorite team. They traded him away, or they just let him go, and he was a free agent. He got picked up by New England. So, they didn't really expect much out of him in New England. They wanted him to be like the pass-catching back for New England, and he actually had a decent year for himself. His play looked pretty solid last year, and then Ramondre Stevenson on the back half of the year ended up getting hurt, and that kind of helped Zeke's case a lot, and it showed that he still has some gas left in the tank. So, obviously, there's been a lot of weird stuff with Zeke's career. Obviously, he had a great first 4 years. It was unbelievable. Those first 4 years were fantastic. And then he got the big contract in 2019, and the wheels kind of fell off. But even at that, you look at 2022 as his last season with the Cowboys, and he had 15 games played for 231 rushing attempts. He still had almost 1,000 yards. He was averaging 4 yards a carry. He only had 17 receptions. For some reason, it was probably because of the Tony Pollard, saga was going on that year where he was just going nuts. But he was still averaging 12.4 fantasy points per game. Now, going into last year, he went to New England, and he was obviously kind of like third fiddle or second fiddle in that offense. So he was only getting 35, if he was lucky, 35% of the snap shares for the running backs, and he ended up having a pretty good year. He let's see here. So in 2023, he had 184 rushing attempts for almost 800 yards. He was averaging 3.5 yards a carry. He had 51 receptions for 313 receiving yards and 5 total touchdowns. He ended with 10 fantasy points per game last year. So I'm looking at him this year, and I'm looking at the value. Coming back to Dallas, there's really no one to rival his job right now outside of Rico Dowdle. And Rico Dowdle, he's going to be a great option. I think they can kind of recreate the Zeke Pollard thing with Dowdle in that offense. Dowdle looks pretty athletic. We really haven't seen a whole lot from him yet. But Zeke is being valued just way too low for a guy coming back to this offense, people are really down on the Dallas Cowboys O-line right now. Let's see here. So Pro Football Focus has the Cowboys O-line ranked for 22 on the year. Now I'm just like, that's just kind of disrespectful. I mean, they just drafted Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe. We still got Zach Martin, Terrence Steele, and Tyler Smith. So I just don't see them being that bad. I still think we're going to be a top 15 O-line. I think Zeke's going to have a lot of opportunities. I think he'll be in the 200 rushing attempt range, and I think I'm thinking he'll get 1,000 yards. So I'm looking at where Zeke's being drafted right now, and they're valuing him at a 2024 middle of the pack third round pick. I'm just not giving him up for that. I have him on my Dynasty team right now. And people are like drafting him in the 13th round in Dynasty Startup. If you're getting Zeke in the 13th round of a Dynasty Startup, you got to be thrilled with what you're going to get this year. Obviously, it's Dynasty, so we need this to continue. He's 29 years old. He just turned 29, so it's just a trial year. We're going to see how it goes, but I'm just not ready to let him go for what people are offering me. I've gotten a 4th-round pick offer. I've gotten someone offered me Tyler Algier. I'm just not letting him go for any of that. I want to see what he's got. He's in a great system this year. Obviously Mike McCarthy, we got a new offensive coordinator, but Mike McCarthy's still going to be running the play calling. So we're going to be running the ball. He's going to be catching the ball. So I'm just ready to hold on to him. Pollard had almost 300 carries last year and only had 1,000 yards. I think Zeke could do better with that if he had 300 carries. He's done it in the past. I don't think his old body is going to handle 300 carries. So I think they'll have him in that 200 range, but I'm just going to hold on to him. And that's my first player I'm going to start with when it comes to holding.
Yeah, I feel the same way. We did our running back rankings show, and a lot of those rankings are also baked into that is the actual dynasty value. We're considering a little bit of like what the overall value is of this player and what we see them producing. And I would say what we see Zeke producing this year is much higher than what his current dynasty value is. That's why he was kind of lower in our rankings. But I happen to be the Dowdle owner. And I think both of these guys are going to get to have fantasy relevance this year. I do think Zeke's going to end up being the lead back. We'll see how that shakes out. But both of these guys are worth rostering, and Zeke could end up having another solid year. And coming Dallas was the number one offense last year.
Yeah, we scored like 500 points on the year. And it's like you got like my thing is he was still ranked 27th in amongst the running backs in yards created. So he's averaging, all those yards after contact still. He's still that guy that's going to move the pile when he puts his head down. So it's like we've always seen that from him. I don't think that's really going to fade until he's really, really done. But, I think people are just really down on the Cowboys O-line this year too, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah, and I mean, the O-line, it's a little bit more forgiving too when you've got an offense that can just take the top off of these defenses.
Yeah. And
you got CeeDee Lamb out there, Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks even,
right.
So we know what they're capable of. And I just like having pieces of the number one offense in the league last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that pick, and I totally agree with you.
Enjoy sports betting and daily fantasy? Well, Daily Grind is here to help you beat the books. They make premium DFS tools that do all the work for you, comparing lines across just about every platform, looking for discrepancies for you to take advantage of. Start off your research with their DFS Optimizer, a tool that finds all the best plays and rates them with their odds to hit indicator. Or if you'd rather have them make your entire slip for you, they have you covered with their AI slip generator. They'll even notify you when a new slip is available. Go to dgfantasy.com and use code BACKDOOR. They will give you 25% off your first subscription all the way up to a year if you want. That's dgfantasy.com, code BACKDOOR.
So my next play, or my next pick is going to be a running back as well. And that's going to be my guy for my Arizona Cardinals, James Conner. He just turned 29 a couple months ago, and people just seem to be thinking that Trey Benson is going to just come in and take this job from him. I don't think that's going to be the case. He actually is more durable than people think. Um, he's had, let's see, in the last, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So over a 7-year span, the least amount of games that he's played is 10 games. And then we've got 1 year, 2017, where he played 12 games. Other than that, it's been 13, 15, 13, 13. And we also have Connor talking about how he's really excited, for this year, which is pretty typical. You're going to hear that from players, especially when they've got a rookie coming in with a good profile who is most likely going to be the future at that position. But Connor's been talking about how he wants to play smarter this year. He wants to be running out of bounds when he needs to, and not trying to get these extra yards that ended up injuring him last year. He played 13 games last year, 208 attempts, went for 1,040 yards, 5 yards per carry, and ended up with 27 receptions for 165 yards, which is low. That's the lowest receiving yards for his career. Still 9 total touchdowns. And, Connor, again, it's just the player speaking about himself, but he said last year is his floor. He wants to turn things up this year. And we've got Drew Petzig, the offensive coordinator, who's a run-heavy coach. And, Kyler Murray loves checking the ball down. You've got a real threat there with the RPO style of playing. We know that Kyler has wheels. And we also know that Connor's actually an underrated pass catcher. So I expect to see that go up a little bit this year as far as the passing game goes. I want to talk about, bumping over to Mike Clay's projections for Connor this year. Mike Clay expects him to play another 13 games, 177 attempts for 813 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's expecting 40 targets, 33 receptions for 224 yards and a receiving touchdown. So that's putting, Mike Clay is expecting him to see just a slight bump lower than what we had last year. So in this position, the position I'm in with James Conner, I already have Bijan Robinson and Jonathan Taylor. So I don't need Connor to be more than a flex and a bye week fill-in for me. But when I try to move him, I'd rather have this guy who could end up maybe having a better year than he did last year. Now we have a full Kyler Murray, a fully healthy Kyler Murray. Kyler missed his first 9 games last year, and James Conner still popped off even without Kyler in the game. I wanted to take a look here. So last year James Conner ended up RB 13 for fantasy, averaging 15.5 points per game. So he had some spike weeks, he had some lower weeks, but his down weeks really weren't that bad. I mean, you never want a down week, but it wasn't like catastrophic. And then he ended the year really strong. So this is another player that I love the offense. Jonathan Gannon's just done a great job as a head coach. Like, the chemistry of the team is looking really good. Now we've got Marvin Harrison Jr. Out there, just stretching the field. You got Michael Wilson, who looked really promising. You got Trey McBride. Teams aren't going to really be able to stack the box without Kyler just, dropping it off to a lot of talented players. So the strength of schedule is difficult. 28th in strength of schedule, and the Cardinals O-line is ranked, I believe, in like the bottom 3 or 4. So that is an issue. But I do think with the with the running threat that Kyler has, and being able to just dish it out to his running backs, I think that this is not going to really hinder James Conner from at least repeating a similar year to what he gave us last year, which was great for me. Because now you're talking about a player that's not just a bye week fill-in, but a legit flex week after week. So in my opinion, again, a late second, or just keep James Conner on my roster and help me try to, make it to the playoffs and maybe try to chase another chip. I'm going to be sticking with Conner. And I think he's being a little underrated. We don't know how Trey Benson is going to transition from college to the NFL. I love Trey Benson as a prospect, but people are acting like he's the lead back already. And I think that this is still James Conner's backfield. And I think there's enough room with this run-heavy offense for them both to be fantasy relevant. But I just think that James Conner is going to, unless he gets injured, which he's talking about playing it safer this year, barring an injury, I think that this is still James Conner's backfield. And I love these pass catching backs. And we've watched James Conner do this his whole year, so I think James is probably, I'd have to disagree. I think that he's going to get more attempts than 177 personally. And I think he's going to be closer to knocking on the door of 1,000 yards. But I do think the 7 TDs is realistic. 7, maybe he'll surprise us and get 8 or 9 again, maybe even double-digit TDs on the year. But super excited about this offense. And I'm going to just be hanging on to James Conner.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's like Conner still is like a great yards after contact guy, so I don't think O-line really matters much. Like, you said he's going to play a little bit safer, but a lot of running backs who have James Conner play style say that, and then they play the same old roughneck football that they always play, and they're fantastic, when it comes to just extending plays and getting those extra yardage. Like, that's what James Conner's been great at his whole career, so I love that guy. I'm definitely with you on that one, on keeping him. There's just not enough out there that, how much – here's my thing with, someone trying to trade me a pick in the middle of a season or before a season. I'm like, how many more points is that pick going to give me than what the player is going to give me? It's not going to give me anything. So it's like, if someone's not trying to give you an equivalent value of piece with a pick, it's not even worth it, in my opinion. So it's like, I'm just, I try to do that to a lot of people, but I'm, I'm guilty of sending out trades where I'm just like, hey, give me your player for a pick. But, it's definitely not worth it when it comes to him. But player that I'm going to be talking about next is Mike Evans. I have Mike Evans on my squad. And, this is a player that's, I feel like it's a little bit of an obvious one where it's like, obviously you don't want to sell Mike Evans right now, but you'd be surprised how many people are trying to snag this guy from me for a low value. And he's being valued at like a mid-second round pick right now in Dynasty. So it's like, I don't know. Like where I drafted Mike Evans, let's see, in a Dynasty startup last year, I took Mike Evans at 7-12. I got him at the bottom of the 7th round. The value just ended up being, unbelievable in that pick. I was like, he wasn't even really on my radar until I seen Baker Mayfield sign there. And I was like, okay, Baker's a guy who loves to throw the deep ball. He's a gunslinger, kind of like Brett Favre-esque when he's always looking to throw the ball downfield and get that big play. So for me, it was exciting to be able to snag Evans, and now they both got some big deals. Mike Evans is on a 2-year, $50 million guaranteed deal, and Baker is on a 3-year deal. So I'm really excited when it comes to dynasty value to keep a hold of Mike Evans here and not really try to trade him away yet. Maybe coming at the end of this contract that he's on now, I'll look to pass him over. But right now, you're talking about a guy who ended 7th on the year for wide receivers in Dynasty, which was just fantastic to have on my team. He had 13 receiving touchdowns. It was just unbelievable to watch him do what he was doing with Baker. 1,255 receiving yards on 79 receptions. So he's a great full PPR player for you too. 79 receptions is awesome. He had 135 targets. So that's the second most targets he's ever had in his career. So that was amazing to see. The last time he had that many targets was in 2016, and he went for 171 targets on that year. But he is actually more efficient in receptions this year. He only had 71 receptions on that 170 target year. So the dude is just, it doesn't seem like he's aging at all. If we look at some of these crazy stats that he was part of last year, he was number 1 in deep targets. So awesome there. And he only had 7 red zone targets. So you're talking about a guy who's just literally burning down the field and getting touchdowns himself. He had 13 total touchdowns that ended 2nd on the year for wide receivers. And he was, let's see here, he was 9th in separation. Like a guy who's 30 years old ending 9th in separation. It's like, that's exactly what you want to see when it comes to valuable receivers like that. So, there was someone tried to trade me. What was it? I think I have it here. Someone had offered me a trade for him that I thought was just ridiculous. I can't find it, but anyway, he's just being valued really low. A 2nd round pick, a mid-2nd round pick right now, mid to late 2nd round pick is what he's being valued at on Keep Trade Cut. That's why like sometimes you just got to stay away from these like trade calculators. So many people get caught up in the trade calculators and they're just looking for like like numeral value, and it's kind of silly sometimes because it's like Mike Evans, the dude's not leaving my squad at this age of his career right now. Obviously they do have a little bit of things going on, like they got rid of their offensive coordinator, but it is Liam Cohen now, and he was the offensive coordinator for the Rams during Baker's tenure there for that little bit of time he had. So they had a great connection there. He gave Baker the keys, and he was like very, very high on Baker Mayfield. He said he loved like the confidence he plays with, and he's really excited to link up with him again. So he's all in on Baker. Obviously, the whole team is. They just gave him a deal. But I think it's going to be great. I think him and Mike Evans are going to continue that little thing they had going. And there's just not a lot else out there. I don't think Rachaad White's going to have that great of a year like he did last year. I just don't think he's going to be able to replicate that. Even if he does, Mike Evans was doing all that during all of that. Rachaad White just, going crazy with all the usage he was getting. But yeah, that's the gist of it. I'm just really high on Mike Evans. I think, honestly, I would go trade for Mike Evans before I traded him away. I think, where he's being valued is just super low. So he's a guy that I would definitely go out and buy right now for sure.
Yeah, especially if people are basing it off of keep, trade, cut.
Yeah, and a lot of people do, man. Like, I've had so many trades where I'm like trading with people and they'll send me the trade calculator numbers back and they're like, you're trying to screw me over. I'm like, oh my God. Like, it's so hard to trade with people anymore because that's all they look at is just, trade data, and like, it's pretty silly, but.
Yeah. And it can be a useful selling point.
Yeah.
If you're trying to make a deal happen, but at the same time it is crowdsourced. So that's just what, it's like everyone that uses that, you have to make a decision before you can use the calculator, right. And they're just basing it all off of that. But yeah, I love the Mike Evans pick. I honestly, when you snagged him last year in our startup, I was thinking, is it going to be Evans or Godwin? And it ended up like convincingly being Evans. Like, Godwin's got so many question marks about where he's at right now in his career, and Evans just went nuts. And like, when we were watching those games, and it's just like Evans would just, first of all, if he gets a little bit of separation, it's different because he's so huge.
Yeah,
like he just needs like a couple of feet, and he's going to be able to get that ball. And Baker was just dropping dimes. Like, their connection, it was just like instantaneous. And you have Evans, even kind of not straight up holding out, but making it clear he wanted Baker to get a contract for him to stay. And
yeah, we've seen him do that in the past too. Like when him and what was his name, Ryan Fitzpatrick, was that his last name?
Yeah.
When they had that thing going, Fitzmagic. Yeah, he was very vocal about the fact that he wanted him over Jameis Winston, and Jameis Winston was being wildly inconsistent, obviously, with the turnovers, and so was Fitzmagic. But they just had that thing going. Like, Fitzmagic was going for like 400 passing yards a game, and you had Mike Evans in the 200, receiving yard range like almost every game. So he just loves the deep ball guys, and Baker Mayfield loves to throw the deep ball. So it's like a match made in heaven. So yeah, I'm really excited to just keep a hold of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you maybe mentioned it, but the fact that he's never not had 1,000-yard season in his career,
yeah, it's wild.
That's pretty decent to get in the 13th round of a startup. Yeah. So,
and this year he's expected to put up another 13 plus fantasy points a game. So it's like, he's good for at least a touchdown a game. It feels like it's just crazy.
Wow. Yeah. That would be crazy if he pulls that off this year, but yeah, definitely
excited.
Definitely,
I think he's got it.
Worth it.
Let's talk about why you should be using Chalkboard, the daily fantasy platform that runs specials every day of the week. Build plays for as low as $1 and enjoy the wide variety of alt lines. The higher the line, the higher the payout. It's that simple. Once you've made your picks, you can go whole hog with their max cash option or insure yourself with their shield play option. Download Chalkboard on your Apple or Android device and use code BACKDOOR for a 100% deposit match.
All right, so for my last player, I'm going to be going with a tight end, and this is going to be Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry, 29 years old. He'll be 30 before the season's over, I believe. And we've seen him have some solid seasons, back in his days with the Chargers. But I feel like people are kind of sleeping on his potential this year. Now, in my case, this isn't going to be my tight end one on my roster. But this is someone that I'm going to be keeping on my roster because I just think that there's a lot of potential for him to have like a resurgence of his career. The Patriots are basically in rebuild. There's overhaul. We've seen Ramondre get paid. We also saw Hunter Henry get paid. They gave him a 3-year deal worth 27 million total, with 15.8 million guaranteed and a 7.5 million dollar signing bonus. So he's under contract through 2027. Obviously, just the 15.8 guaranteed. So I'm sure they can restructure things if they're not happy with, keeping him around. But I really like his upside here. Um, he did go for 6 touchdowns. Like, the touchdowns were the biggest part of his upside last year. But you got a situation now with a rookie quarterback they drafted, and Drake May, who I believe has a lot of upside. Um, and it'll probably be a little while before May is like in the starting position, but I do like the upside here. I think he could end up being solid for me. I currently have Trey McBride, but before I traded for Trey McBride in a little bit of a blockbuster deal in our Dynasty league, I was holding on to Hunter Henry even more, considering the fact that I'm not going to get much for him. Like, Keep Trade Cut has him at a late 4th, which I'm just not interested in at all. I'm not trying to roster a ton of tight ends for Dynasty, obviously, but someone like Henry, I just really think that there's more upside to be had here. Last year, their offense was just a mess, and the quarterback situation was terrible. He still had 62 targets on 14 games played, 42 receptions for 419 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. So in this situation, you've got Alex Van Pelt coming in. So their new offensive coordinator, who was the OC in Cleveland for the last 4 years. And if you just look at some of the approach, he has a little bit of he's somewhat West Coast style offense is kind of his basic framework. But we saw how he can utilize tight ends. If you think about Njoku last year, and Hunter Henry, the only person he has for competition here is really Austin Hooper, who I don't think is like completely just a total. I think Austin Hooper is still somewhat of a talented player, but I don't think he's going to threaten Hunter Henry at all. They've got a difficult schedule. The strength of schedule for the Patriots is 32nd in the league. So I do think that there's going to be a lot of situations where they're, having to pass the ball to stay in these games and maybe try to come back. But if we talk about what Mike Clay has him projected for, he's projecting him for 15 games played, 67 targets, which is a little bit of an uptick, and 44 receptions, which is also a little bit of an uptick. He has him going for 434 yards and 4 touchdowns. There's also a chance that it could turn into, like they don't have many veterans when it comes to the wide receiver position. I believe that their guy with most experience who's going to be on the field a majority of the time is Demario Douglas, who's in his 2nd year. So I think that we could see a situation where Hunter Henry is getting more targets than people were expecting. And we know that he's got the, athleticism, and he's a solid pass catcher. And they just paid him. So he's got the contract. And so for me, rather than trade him away for a late 4th, I'd rather, again, hang on to this player and maybe have him have a couple spike weeks where I could, turn him into more than a late 4th. Otherwise, I'd rather just keep him on my roster. He's 29 years old, but that's, the window for tight ends is very different than running backs. And like, obviously he's not Travis Kelce, but you do see tight ends having relatively long careers in the NFL. It's not that uncommon. So I think that for a late fourth rounder, I'd much rather keep Hunter Henry and hope that we are a little bit surprised, because people were surprised last year. He's part of the reason I had to plug and play him last year, and he ended up taking me to the championship and the postseason. So when I see that upside of the way Njoku was, and again, make no mistake, I'm not saying that he's comparable to Njoku. I'm just saying the scheming, with the run heavy offense and the stretching the field a little bit. I just like the offensive coordinator situation. I like the fact that he doesn't have any competition really as far as the starting tight end goes. And I do believe in his talent. People are kind of like sleeping on him a little bit. And I'm not saying go trade for him, but if he's on your waiver wire, you should go get him. Like, he should be on someone's roster, in my opinion. So yeah, Hunter Henry's going to be the last player I have that I've just been kind of, he's been on my roster. I've thrown him out in some trades and people are just way too low on him. And I know that everyone's all excited about Sam Laporta and looking for that next rookie who's going to just pop off, and that's fine. But this guy should definitely be on your roster, because he might be someone you need to plug and play on bye weeks. If your tight end goes down, he's someone who is got the starting position, I think that he's someone you can trust week after week. And I'm going to be hanging on to him.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like Hunter Henry has that like big body syndrome where he kind of reminds me of like a Jason Witten in a way, where it's like he runs that Y stick route so well where he can break it off either way. And he does end up in the red zone a lot. And there was a lot of footage I seen last year of Hunter Henry being in a very catchable position for a pass. And the quarterback play was just so awful last year for the Patriots. And it was just, that whole thing was just a disaster. So, I mean, of course, the situation, it can only get better for him, right? I think that's like definitely a good assessment, is that Hunter Henry is in a great scenario to really eat this year. So, it's kind of a boomer bust year for him, but I do think that if he has a big year, he's going to be a great dynasty pickup for sure, because, I mean, who else are they going to go get right now? It's like there's not a lot of options. The tight end market is like almost in the same situation like the quarterback market. There's just not a lot of great tight ends out there on the market right now, and I think Hunter Henry is definitely one of them. So I definitely agree with you on that one.
At least like a starting caliber. Like, yeah. I think it's relatively deep this year in the sense that you have all the way down to Jake Ferguson.
Yeah.
But as far as this is the type of pick that I just don't think he should be on your waiver wire. If you're in like a 12-man or larger league,
yeah.
He's you have a starter with no competition, interesting offensive coordinating situation, and he just got a contract. So
yep.
I'd just like go pick him up if he's out there.
Oh, dude, yeah, I've held so many tight ends like that. I just dropped Gerald Everett. I was like, I didn't want to drop Gerald Everett for the longest time because I thought he's so athletic and such a freak that I thought, okay, maybe he'll have a chance. But I finally just dropped him. Hurt to drop him, but yeah. Anyway, to cover my last guy here, I'm going to be talking about Nick Chubb, and this might come as a surprise that he's being undervalued, but my God, people are putting him in the overall value. People are picking him under Jerome Ford right now in redraft, or in not in redraft, but dynasty startup drafts, which is just like the weirdest thing ever. I didn't think people would be this low on him. I know it's a scary injury, but the dude has come back from this injury before. I know he's a little bit older now. He's 28 years old, almost 29, but they just showed a footage. I'll see if I can edit the footage into this clip, but they showed footage of him squatting like an absurd amount of weight. He's doing jump cuts. He's doing jumping with extra weight on his back. The dude looks like he's fine. I know that's a bad injury, but the dude looks like he's ready to play. I think he's going to be, he's likely to be placed on the PUP list, but we'll see. If he could get any sort of time in training camp, I'm fully sold on the fact that Nick Chubb is going to play a lengthy season. There's just no way I would ever draft Jerome Ford over Nick Chubb right now. There's just no way. Jerome Ford's a great player, but Nick Chubb, just to go over a little bit of what he did his last season he played. His last season, he had a full season. It was in 2022. He had 13 total touchdowns, played 17 games for 300 rushing attempts. He had 1,525 yards. He was averaging 5.1 yards a carry. He had 27 receptions for 239 receiving yards. So the dude is an absolute monster when he's on the field. I don't think the injury is going to like end his career or anything like that. I don't think we're ever going to see a situation where Nick Chubb is just not valuable anymore. It could be one of those things where he maybe has a slow year coming back from the injury, because it's usually the year after the recovery that they really start to pop off again and start trusting their leg. When it comes to an injury like this, a lot of what you hear is it's just hard to trust your legs again. People get fear of like their leg giving out again, so it's just hard for them to get over the mental side of things. Even though their leg is fine, it's hard for them to get over that mental blockage of watching your leg be snapped in half like Vecna got a hold of you. So it's definitely a hard thing to get over mentally. But the dude is just such a beast, man. He was number one in yards after contact that last year that he played a full season of, third in rushing yards. He's just such a monster. Like when you see a running back run, you want him to look like Nick Chubb when they run the ball. You want him to run angry. Obviously the Browns offensive coordinating situation is a little bit different. They've got new guys coming in, and I think their old offensive coordinator is now the coordinator for Patriots. Yeah. So interesting. We'll see how it looks. We'll see if they maybe just go with, more of Jerome Ford over Nick Chubb just to like give him some more time. Who knows? But I'm just not in a situation where I don't have Nick Chubb right now. I just thought he was a good example of like a guy. I would never drop him. I would never trade him. He's got way too much value. I mean, he put up in half PPR, he put up 267 fantasy points in 2022. So it's like, he obviously is not, heavily involved in the receiving game, but 27 receptions that year is not bad. But the guy is just such a freak. So he looks like a freak athlete coming back from an injury like that again. He snapped his leg in college a very similar way. So he's done it before. I think he can do it again. There's no way that he's listed as the RB40 right now, which is just kind of crazy. I know it's because of the injury, but there's no way you should ever go sell Nick Chubb right now for anything less than like I wouldn't. It would be hard for me to give Nick Chubb up for anything less than like a first round pick, or anything of that sort.
Yeah.
And
even if people aren't going to give you that right now, which they probably won't because of the injury concern, it's like I wouldn't want to let him go for any less than that.
Yeah. And
personally,
I was talking with the guy in our league. I was trying to go get him, and I offered him. Mind you, I was the champ in the league, so my first round pick's kind of just like an early first at that, or an early second. But he was like, it doesn't make sense for me to trade him right now for a pick that's not going to give me any points. And, I had like way too many starting running backs on my team that I can start. So he's like, there's just no way I'm giving you Chubb. So maybe if I was in a different situation, he would have.
A little personal.
Yeah, a little personal. So maybe if I was, not the champ, he would have traded me. I'm being, treated very poorly now that I have won. But, yeah, it's
no
just
one wants to help you run it back.
Yeah. So Nick Chubb, definitely you should go buy him for how low people are trying to, put him right now. He's another one. I'm not trying to make this a buy sell trade episode, but I would 100% go put all my eggs, not all of my eggs, but I'd put some of my eggs in that Nick Chubb basket, because I know he's gonna be back. Like if you're watching these videos that I'm seeing and how confident he sounds, he says he's not even worried about it because he's already gone through the injury, so he knows how to get his mental right. So I'm fully trusting Nick Chubb in what he's saying. So definitely high on Nick Chubb.
Yeah, and when we made our running back rankings video, it broke our heart. We even talked about it where we had to rank him, because that was like still, he's like early in his rehab, and he was doing a little bit of movement, just kind of jumping on each leg. And then now the tone is changing quickly. When he squatted, I think it was 500 pounds, and you see the bar bending,
So
and then you see him just doing it no problem. It's like all of a sudden, I think everybody's light bulb was going off, where they're like, oh my God, he's probably going to be fine. And I think you're going to start seeing Jerome Ford, his stock going down, but we're still within that window. It's not a guarantee, but yeah, Nick Chubb, if he's back 100%, because it wasn't just like he went out and twisted his leg. It was a nasty, unfortunate tackle situation that is not very common.
No, it was a freak accident, 100%.
Yeah, so it's not like it was a durability issue. It was like, no, it's like that would happen to anybody who was tackled that way. So if he's back 100%,
Yeah.
look out. He's going to skyrocket.
And
so I love that pick.
He's a big reason the NFL is trying to change like the hip drag tackling, because that's what happened. They hip tackled him and drug him down, and he fell back on that leg and broke it. But, and it does help, though, that he has been through the same injury. Like in college, it was his other leg. So, it's like he knows how to come back from it mentally and physically. So that is a big plus when you're looking at an injury like this. It's never going to be a Cam Akers situation where they're like, oh, yeah, he's good. And then he gets traded and sent off into the ether of the NFL free agency and all that stuff. But I think he'll definitely be valuable for sure.
Yeah, if he's back to even 80%, he's got that backfield locked in.
Yeah.
Like none of those other guys are going to be taking snaps from him. So you'll have a locked and loaded RB1. So if we made that RB rankings video today, we would already just post the squat video.
Yeah.
I would have to be bumping him up at least a full tier.
Sure.
But so. This is the window to go get Nick Chubb, in our opinion, right now.
Yep.
Before we see more,
Yeah.
Because it's just his stock's just gonna keep going up from here. But yeah, that covers all 6 of the players that we think are not worth their current trade value. Guys we'd rather just keep on our team. Again, I just want to make sure I emphasize my Hunter Henry play was a little bit different from what the rest of these plays were. That's not my starting tight end, but that's someone who I just want on my roster because I'd rather have him on my roster for the reasons I said than trade him away for a late 4th round pick. Like, no thanks. I'd much rather see how this shakes out and then maybe flip him for more in the middle of the season. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you so much. And we will catch you in the next video.
See you guys.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Backdoor Fantasy Sports Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop us a comment. You can also find us on all platforms at Backdoor FS.